Thank you to Rebel Girls for allowing Read to a Child volunteers to read selected stories from Goodnight Stories for Rebel Girls, 100 Immigrant Women Who Changed the World, written by Elena Favilli and illustrated by 70 extraordinary female artists from 29 countries. La, 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 la. La, 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 la.
Nadine Burke Harris, pediatrician. Once there was a girl who wanted to be a pediatrician so she could help children be healthy. With a father who was a scientist and a mother who was a nurse, Nadine knew from an early age how science could help people. After moving from Jamaica to California as a kid, Nadine often felt left out of place because there were a few immigrants or children of color in her school. At first, she spoke English using a Jamaican dialect called patois. This made it difficult for classmates and teachers to understand her. But these challenges didn't stop Nadine from excelling in school. Nadine studied medicine for a long time and eventually became a pediatrician. She opened a pediatric clinic in one of the poorest and most underserved neighborhoods in San Francisco. Over time, Nadine noticed that her most unhealthy patients had something in common. They had a lot of stress and difficulties in their lives. Rather than simply treating her young patients' symptoms, Nadine wanted to treat the cause. She created an organization to research childhood trauma. I was inspired to make sure that every child has an equal opportunity to grow up healthy, Nadine said. In 2019, Nadine was asked to be California's first ever Surgeon General, the head of public health policy and spokesperson for medical issues. In her new role, Nadine continued to help children who have experienced toxic stress. According to Nadine, the sooner doctors understand their patients' problems, the sooner their patients can be healed. La, 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 la.
Yoki Matsuoka, robotics engineer. Once upon a time, there was a girl who dreamed with the intensity of a machine. In the beginning, she wanted to become a professional tennis player when she grew up. She moved to the United States at the age of 16 and hoped to make it as a pro. Unfortunately, Yoki suffered injury after injury and decided that a tennis career wasn't for her. Instead, she found herself daydreaming. What if she built a robot that could play tennis with her whenever she wanted? So, Yoki went to the University of California, Berkeley, and studied robotics. She wanted to know how robots could help people. Yoki became a pioneer in the field of neurobotics, studying the relationship between computers and the central nervous system.
Yoki eventually built mechanical arms that could help people learn to use their muscles again after a stroke. Her work was so creative. She received a prize called the MacArthur Fellowship, sometimes known as the Genius Grant. Yoki wasn't the type of scientist to focus on just one project, though. She wanted to help people become better versions of who they've always wanted to be. She was one of the first people to work at Google X, a top-secret research department dedicated to solving hard problems. Then she helped start a company called Nest Labs and built a smart home thermostat. She went on to work for Google Health, which aims to use technology to change and save people's lives, and Panasonic. La, 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 la.
Once, there was a girl who grew up in the Philippines who was fascinated by plants that lived in odd places. Moss growing on the sides of buildings, flowers blooming on balconies, tiny weeds crawling up through the cracks in the sidewalk. Her name was Rosalie. And when she went to college at the University of Philippines, she got a degree in botany, the study of plants. To continue her education, Rosalie moved to Israel to get a graduate degree from Hebrew University. There, she met a scientist named Im Friedman. Im had discovered tiny blue-green algae inside and on the underside of rocks. They mostly grew in deserts or hard-to-reach places, so they were very hard to study. But Rosalie was able to grow them in the laboratory. People joked that she had a blue-green thumb. Rosalie and Im got married, settled in the United States, and traveled the world, seeking out life forms that grew up in places too cold, hot, dry, or unusual for most other plants. Together, they discovered extremely small living organisms within the rocks in Antarctica's deserts and frozen into the earth in Siberia. With her amazing talent for growing things, Rosalie took tiny samples of these microbes home and grew more of them in her lab so scientists could study them. After NASA landed the Viking probe on Mars in 1976, scientists studied the research Rosalie contributed to try to learn more about the kinds of life that might exist on a planet with such a harsh environment.
Min Mehta, orthopedic surgeon. Sit up straight. When she was 11, Min heard that from more adults than she could count. Then one day, a family friend who was also a nurse said something that changed her life. She revealed that Min couldn't sit up straight because she had scoliosis, a curve in her spine. Although she was born in Iran, Min grew up in India in the 1930s, when there wasn't much that doctors could do to help children with scoliosis. Min wanted to change that. She had known since she was 6 years old that she wanted to be a doctor when she grew up. By the time she finished medical school in India, she knew exactly what kind of doctor she wanted to be, a surgeon. Min decided to move to the UK to continue her medical training. There were hardly any women working as surgeons at that time. So when Min was offered an interview in London, the other doctors were shocked when she walked in the room. They had thought Min was a man's name. Min became one of the most respected orthopedic surgeons in the UK for her study of scoliosis in children. She realized that in many cases, if a child's back could be held in the correct position for enough time, starting when they were very small, the extra curve in their spine would straighten naturally as the child grew. Min taught other surgeons how to use a special plaster cast, now called a metacast, to correct children's spines without surgery. Doctors today still use metacast to treat scoliosis in children.
This is Rihanna's story, an entrepreneur and a singer. Once there was a girl who wanted her music to be heard all over the world. When Rihanna was a teenager, she auditioned for a record label. The producers were so impressed, they encouraged Rihanna to move to the United States. Even though she loved Barbados and her family, she wasn't afraid to leave it all behind. I wanted to do what I had to do, even if it meant moving to America, Rihanna said. Not long after she arrived in the US, the label offered her a contract and her career took off. Her songs played on the radio and fans lined up to see her on stage. Yet it took a while for Rihanna to find her true voice. In Barbadian culture, Rihanna said being quiet was considered polite, but in the US, her quietness was seen as rude. You mean well, and it can come across in a different way in a different culture, Rihanna said. Rihanna has built a reputation as an artist and entrepreneur who's true to herself. She's won 9 Grammys and is one of the best-selling music artists of all time. Her musical success also opened doors into areas she never expected, including business. In 2017, Rihanna launched Fenty Beauty, a cosmetics brand that focused on inclusivity. She and her team spent 2 years developing a foundation that came in a huge variety of skin tones, more than 40 shades. Her company's emphasis on diversity has inspired other cosmetics brands to do the same. Then, in 2019, Rihanna created her own luxury fashion line. The thing that keeps me alive and passionate is being creative, Rihanna said.
Xiaolan Wu, physicist. Once upon a time, there was a girl who slept in a rice shop. Xiaolan and her mother and brother lived in a crowded slum in Hong Kong where there wasn't enough space in their apartment for everyone to lie down. Growing up, Xiaolan first dreamed of becoming a painter. Then one day, she read a book about the great physicist and chemist Marie Curie and changed her mind. She would become a scientist instead and search for a different kind of beauty in her work. When it came time to go to university, Xiaolan knew her family could not afford to pay her tuition. Then she got a letter from Vassar College in New York. It offered her a full scholarship to study there.
After Vassar, Xiaolan went on to get a PhD in physics at Harvard University. She was fascinated by the tiny particles that made up atoms, which in turn made up everything else in the universe. Because they were so small, they were also very hard to study. In 1974, Xiaolan's research team discovered a particle called J-psi, which helps scientists understand more about how matter works. Soon after, she helped discover gluon, a particle that holds parts of an atom together. Then she tackled one of the most important challenges in all of physics, the discovery of the Higgs boson, a particle so hard to find that many scientists were not even sure it existed. In 2012, Xiaolan's team found evidence that the Higgs boson was real, and to Xiaolan, it was beautiful.
This story is about Sarah Mazrui, who was a planetary geologist. Once, there was a girl in Iran who wanted to blaze her own trail like a comet in the night sky. Sarah spent her childhood marveling at outer space and reading books about brave girls who weren't afraid to be different. It was good training for what was to come. When Sarah was 13, her family moved to Canada so she and her sisters could study and do whatever they wanted. Things were different in Canada, but not all doors were open the way they'd hoped. Sarah dreamed of being a NASA scientist. While working on her PhD, she was chosen for a NASA internship, but a few weeks after she arrived, Sarah received unexpected news. She didn't have security clearance to be at NASA because she had been born in Iran. The officials even questioned how she'd gotten the internship. Sarah was frustrated. She had been honest about her birthplace from the beginning.
Nevertheless, Sarah's sense of adventure and her love of math and science propelled her to finish her internship, get her PhD, and become a planetary scientist. She went on to teach others about space and to study things including the history of asteroids and the best landing locations for future lunar missions. She also spoke out for equality. She believed that people should be free to be leaders in STEM careers, no matter their gender or where they're from. I wonder how much more I could have achieved, Sarah said, if I didn't have to spend half of my time defending the fact that I belong where I am.
Sandra Kaufman, electrical engineer. Once upon a time, there was a girl who dreamed of working for NASA. On a summer night in Costa Rica, Sandra watched the first moon landing on her neighbor's TV. The living room was packed with people. But as Neil Armstrong's boot touched the moon's surface, no one said a word. They were too amazed. I walked home that night and I looked at the moon so far away, Sandra said, and I knew then that I wanted to be a part of that adventure. Sandra shared her dream with her mother right away. Sandra's family was poor and her mother raised her alone, working long days at difficult jobs. But she saw the light in her daughter's eyes and encouraged her to work hard. Sandra did work hard. She excelled in school and enrolled in a Costa Rican university. She wanted to study electrical engineering, but a professor told her it wasn't ladylike, so she studied industrial engineering instead. In the middle of college, Sandra's family moved to the US. There, she was able to study electrical engineering and physics. like she'd always wanted to, and earned her degree. A few years later, Sandra achieved her childhood dream. She was hired by NASA. She became a NASA engineer, focusing on designing satellites and on space exploration, including missions to Mars. "I just finished a satellite to Mars," Sandra said in 2015. "It is incredible that a little piece of me and a little piece of Costa Rica has traveled to Mars and is now orbiting the red planet." Sandra Kaufman, born in May 10, 1962, in Costa Rica, who moved to the United States of America. "When I was 7 years old, I wanted to go to the moon. Look where I am today. I have landed among the stars." Sandra Kaufman.
Yan Yan Tan, ballerina. Yan Yan was a girl who loved music. Whenever she heard a song on the radio or television in her family's Shanghai apartment, her body would sway and she'd find herself dancing in time with the rhythm. Her mother wanted to send her to ballet school. Absolutely not, her father said. He wanted Yan Yan to become a doctor. Ballet was a distraction, he thought. "We'll flip a coin," her mother said firmly. 10-year-old Yan Yan held her breath as the silver-colored 5-cent coin tumbled through the air. When it landed, her mother's side was facing up. She was gonna learn ballet.
Yan Yan eventually won many prizes at international ballet competitions for her graceful, elegant style. When she was 18, the artistic director of the San Francisco Ballet invited her to the U.S. to dance as a guest star at the company's 1995 opening night gala. Afterward, that director asked her to stay and join the ballet company permanently. Yan Yan soon became a principal dancer, one of the company's most senior and special ballerinas. She was the youngest principal dancer in the company's history and the first to come from Asia. Yan Yan has danced the lead in the world's most famous ballets, including Giselle, Swan Lake, and The Nutcracker. In 2015, she celebrated her 20th anniversary with the San Francisco Ballet with a special tour of performances in China, the place where her life as a ballerina began, all thanks to the flip of a coin.
Once there was a girl who lived in a home filled with people who loved numbers and science. In Timnit's house in Ethiopia, when you encountered a problem, you found a way to fix it. When Timnit was a stranger, war broke out between Ethiopia and Eritrea. People of Eritrean descent, like Timnit and her family, were being forced to flee. Her family left the country and found asylum in the United States. When Timnit started high school in Massachusetts, she tried to enroll in the hardest math and science classes. To Timnit's confusion, the teacher discouraged her. His teacher didn't think a student from Africa could do high-level work. Timnit couldn't believe how ridiculous that was. She graduated as soon as she could and enrolled at Stanford University. By the time she left Stanford, she had a PhD in electrical engineering. During her graduate studies, Timnit got interested in artificial intelligence. She saw that many computer programs came built in with prejudices and biases. Those that recognized faces, for example, didn't work as well on people of color. If artificial intelligence was going to change the world for the better, Timnit realized, it had to be fair. The people who built these tools should look like the people who use them. So Timnit started programs to encourage women and people of color to study engineering. Today, Timnit works for Google to create ethical artificial intelligence programs.
Thank you again to Rebel Girls. To learn more about Rebel Girls, visit rebelgirls.com.